the Samsung Galaxy A06 or the Redmi 14C. Both are entry-level phones priced similarly and each offering some value, but which is the better budget device? For starters, these two are really low budget devices and you don't get one with high expectations, be it for performance or cameras. However, they can handle the basics, or you could say the bare minimum, which is calling, texting, and giving you the budget Android experience from each brand's perspective. You can pick up the Redmi 14C for under 140k in Naira and the Galaxy A06 for a little above that. This is for their base versions. Now, while both phones cost under $100, the 14C is the more affordable option as its base version has storage of 128 gigs. It also has 6 and 8 gig RAM options available in this region. The Samsung A06 has 64 gig for its base version, and we only get the 4 gig RAM versions here in Nigeria. Now that can be a deal breaker because for budget phones you need good enough RAM and storage to get a decent experience. The 6 gig version of the 14C still does not cost more than the A06. So if you're looking at which one offers more in RAM and storage for less, it's the Redmi 14C. I actually recommend going for at least the 6 gig version if you are choosing the Redmi. It will fare much better than the 4 gig version. As for accessories, the Redmi 14C comes with more. It comes with a case and also has a charging brick in the box. The Galaxy A06 does not. It is not news at this point, but it is worth mentioning, especially since the 14C has one. The Redmi has a slightly higher battery capacity at 5116 mAh compared to the standard 5000 on the A06. Its charging brick is 33 watts even when it supports just 18 watts charging. The Galaxy A06 supports faster charging at 25 watts, but you have to buy a charger. Looking at their design, there are no similarities. The 14C has this radial camera design which a lot of the budget phones seem to be adopting recently. But the Samsung, well, it looks like a Samsung except for the absence of a third camera ring. So with the right case, it can even look like an iPhone 16. If you ask me though, the A06 looks more mature in design. But the 14C has a leather version which some might prefer. For build quality, both are good, but the A06 feels more durable. On their display, they both have 720p LCD, both with a notch, but the Redmi 14C gets the advantage with a higher refresh rate of 120Hz. The A06 has the basic 60Hz. You might argue that the 120Hz is an overkill at this price point, especially on the 720p display, but it gives the 14C the edge when it comes to fluidity. They are both good for media consumption and have a decent level of brightness. The Redmi 14C is taller at 6.88 inches compared to 6.7 inches on the A06. For performance, both phones are mostly on par except that you get the higher refresh rate on the 14C, so it allows for better performance where higher refresh rate is favored. They both have budget processors, with the 14C having the more recent Helio G81 and the A06 with a MediaTek Helio G85, same as on its predecessor the A05. They are both very close in performance, but the G81 is more recent and supports 120Hz refresh rate. There is no noticeable difference between these two when it comes to their processors. They will both handle your average task as expected of a budget phone, and it will come down to their software optimization, which you then have to keep your expectations low because these devices are entry level. They both run on Android 14 and lighter versions of their respective custom skins. The A06, while having Samsung's One UI 6.1 and is probably the cleanest software experience you can get at this price point, lacks features like a default screen recorder and Smart View. You will also experience some delays with the software, especially when the device has been idle for a while. With the Redmi 14C, HyperOS is riddled with ads and bloatware. I mean unskippable ads when doing something as simple as changing your wallpaper. It also lacks pop-up or split-screen multitasking, and there is no second space. But the good news is that it gets multi-user, which is a good alternative to second space. Now, these limitations to some extent are expected for smartphones at this end of the budget. You are pretty much getting your money's worth. You just need to pick between a cleaner but somewhat laggy One UI experience or a slightly snappier but ad-filled and limited multitasking HyperOS experience. The A06 gets guaranteed 2 years of OS upgrades. Nothing is specified for the Redmi 14C, but it should be able to get at least 1 or probably 2, although the history suggests that Samsung is the more reliable and faster with the updates. These are not gaming devices, and gaming should be the least on your mind getting a device at this price point. But if for any reason your options are limited, titles like Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG Mobile are playable at the recommended low settings. Do not expect flawless gaming experience or high frame rates. On the battery performance, as mentioned before, the Redmi 14C has slightly higher capacity. However, both will give you satisfactory battery life and will last you at least a day on full charge with average use. In the camera department, they both have similar specs on the rear. You can ignore the robust setup on the 14C. Both have 50 megapixels for their main camera and 2 megapixel depth sensor. Every other sensor there is just aesthetics. The selfie camera on the 14C is 13 megapixels, while that on the A06 is 8 megapixels. They will both give you okay photos, and it might come down to your preference as they process color tones differently. This is mostly evident with selfies. I also found the ones on the Redmi 14C to be sharper. As we already established, these are entry-level phones, and you have to keep the expectations at a minimum. Just ensure to use these under the right lighting conditions. Both the Redmi 14C and the Samsung Galaxy A06 offers decent value for their price depending on what you want. The 14C stands out with its higher refresh rate display, a larger battery. It is also more affordable. However, the presence of ads and lack of some multitasking features in its version of HyperOS might be a drawback for some users. The Galaxy A06 boasts cleaner software experience with One UI and benefits from the inclusion of a fingerprint sensor, which has been absent from this end of Samsung's phones. It is also the more mature looking phone when it comes to design, but it lacks in the display technology when compared to the Redmi 14C. 60Hz refresh rate is the bare minimum for this price point, and almost every phone in this category offers higher. Ultimately, the best choice will come down to your preference and what you intend to use it for. They will both serve better as backup phones, but if it is your first phone, seeing all that is highlighted in this comparison, you should go for the one that best fits your use case. Other options to consider at this price point is Infinix Hot 50i or Tecno Spark 30C, similarly priced and offered just as much in features or probably even more. So that is the Galaxy A06 versus the Redmi 14C. See you in the next one.